Yes guys, welcome to episode 2 of the Ironman project, where things became pretty serious for me. Now, if you don't know, pretty much any triathlon is made up of a swim, bike and run, and having done a couple of triathlons before, over 2 years ago now, I came to realise that swimming was in fact my worst discipline, and with an Ironman consisting of a 2.4 mile swim at the very start before anything else, I now know that this journey is going to become quite difficult. So in this episode, I thought it'd be a good idea to essentially do a training recap of what a typical weekend currently looks like with training 26 weeks out from my Ironman. So with me just here is my training calendar for the entire year, and basically how I'm planning on managing everything alongside life as a father and also juggling the coaching business as well. Because as you know, Ironman training is going to take up about 15 hours a week at minimum once we get to that 20-week mark from the event. So right now on this calendar, we are here as it's the first week of January as of this recording, which means we've got about 26 or 27 weeks until the Ironman, which is down here. Now for the first 6 weeks, I'm just planning on enjoying the process and working on building a nice foundation, making sure that swimming, cycling and running is just part of my routine in the week, so that when we get to 20 weeks out, I'm ready to start a more rigid and structured routine where we can build on some nice volume and intensities. But at least for the time being, I'm still doing the disciplines and working that in with some strength and conditioning in the gym. But my main focus for now is make it routine, make it habit, and also work on my efficiency and my technique with these movements. So when we come to the 20-week out mark, we have some nice efficiency and we have lesser chance of getting injured when we start building that intensity, because we've got good technique, good foundations to build on. Now with that being said, the discipline I'm actually focusing those efforts on the most is swimming, because I do not have a great track record with swimming and it is by far my weakest discipline out of all three. So let's head down to the pool for a 2K swim session, and I'll be explaining exactly how I plan on tackling 3,800 meters in the Lake of Switzerland in July. Alright guys, you are joining me in the pool now, and believe it or not, this is actually a massive improvement for what my swimming used to be a few years ago. And believe it or not, up until about the age of 23 or 24, I'm 28 now, I couldn't actually swim doing freestyle or front crawl, as you can see right now, and I could literally only just about doggy paddle to keep myself afloat. So it was about 4 years ago where I challenged myself to train for my first half Ironman. I haven't done much in the last couple of years, so this is still pretty new to me, and it was at that point where I actually had my first swimming lesson, where I went into a like an endless infinity pool. I was filmed. The triathlon coach, she gave me loads of really useful tips and advice, and I basically just acted on that before I had any further improvements. So I'm currently swimming at around 2 minutes 10 to 2 minutes 20 per 100 meters, and for my goal of doing the Ironman in 12 hours in July, I basically need to do the swim in 1 hour and 20 or less to give myself enough time for the bike and the run. So for that to happen, I need to comfortably swim at 2 minutes per 100 meters, and obviously at a bigger distance than what I'm swimming at now. So I need to swim faster for longer, so there is lots of work to be done here. So looking at my technique here, it's actually really useful for me to be filming these videos for my swimming, because as you're doing new movements, it's very hard to judge what your body is doing, because you don't have much kinesthetic awareness or awareness of what your body is doing during that. So for me, because I'm concentrating so much on breathing, not drowning and staying alive, it's hard for me to be aware of what my body is doing whilst I'm swimming. All I know is that I'm moving slowly and it's difficult, but when I film it, I can see that, right, my elbows aren't coming very high, my legs are really wide, I'm not gliding very much, my efficiency just really isn't there. So what I plan on doing is just spending a lot more time in the pool working on these things and just focusing on one or two things at the time. So the first thing for me is definitely going to be like the elbow, and the elbow drive coming out of the water, then coming back up to catch, and then also trying to keep my legs together to actually have more efficiency, and also the rotation and my breathing, because I can see that I'm wasting a lot of energy and efficiency with my head movement and just my general body movement and position in a pool. So lessons will be coming up in the next 6 months, but that's definitely something I'm going to be working on in the next couple of sessions I have. So I think it goes without saying that some swimming lessons over the next 6 months are definitely going to be valuable. I do have something lined up for this and some exciting content to be coming around this. But for now, we're still going to be looking at drills on YouTube and basically just looking at technique and refining that and spending as much time on that as possible. Because in my mind, if I can improve the efficiency of the swim as much as possible, it means we're not as tired coming out of the lake before we get onto the bike and obviously for the run. And from what I've heard from people who are a lot more experienced in triathlons than me, you can do the swim and get onto the bike, but sometimes the fatigue from the swim can actually catch up to you towards the end of the bike if you're not efficient. So I definitely want to improve this as much as possible before going into the full 6 months of preparation for the Ironman. Now, in a typical weekend of training on a Saturday and Sunday, I would do all three disciplines at a slightly bigger distance than in the week. Monday to Friday is typically when I have less time to commit to the bigger distances, so I do some more intense sessions, generally lasting less than 60 minutes. And on a weekend is when I'll do the bigger distances for the swim, bike and run, split over the Saturday and the Sunday. So for this weekend of training that I'm showing you in this video, it was a long swim on the Saturday, followed by a longer bike and a short run on the Sunday, otherwise known as a brick session, which is essentially when you combine two of the disciplines or more into one session back to back. So let's go to the training cave, otherwise known as my office / spare room, where we jump onto the bike for a turbo session, followed by a run afterwards. Alright, so session 2 of this weekend is a brick session, and it's the first one of this base cycle that I'm doing. But before I jump into that, I just want to take a moment to appreciate some of this cycling gear that I've got. But today's session on the bike, which is actually in front of me now, is going to be on the turbo for 60 minutes. So it's 2 bikes workout, so it's 10-minute warm-up, 15-minute hard working block, followed by a 10-minute break, another 15-minute hard working block, and then a 10-minute cool down. So it's just around an hour's workout, and then we're putting the trainers on, going out straight for a 20-minute run. So just getting those legs acclimatized to running off the bike. So we're going to hop on the turbo trainer now. I'm going to jump into some of the benefits I feel of using a turbo, especially when it's the winter here in the UK. So on the turbo trainer now, in what's essentially my spare room / office, it's made me realise that one thing I'm going to need for this preparation for this Ironman is a garage. So we are working on that as a next step. But in the meantime, here in the office, I really like the turbo trainer for a lot of reasons, but they all basically boil down to the fact that with cycling and anything outdoors, there's so many uncontrollable variables to an extent, whereas when you're on a turbo trainer, most of those variables become controllable, which meaning you can get more meaningful training sessions from them. For example, wind resistance. That on a bad day in the UK, which is quite often, is going to provide you a lot more resistance with your training sessions on your bike, as opposed to doing them on the trainer or a turbo, and being able to keep that intensity, heart rate, output all consistent, instead of having the wind affect those variables that I just mentioned. And from a psychological perspective, there's certain things I can do to actually make the time on the bike a lot easier. For example, I can stick YouTube on, I can put my earphones on, I can listen to some music, and there's certain ways I can distract myself, whereas obviously being outside, I don't really have those as options. So yes, it makes it easier, and it means I can ease myself into the process and get my mind used to what's essentially going to be 6 or 7 hours on the bike for the full Ironman. Another one of the downfalls to cycling outside compared to a turbo is that the gradients are extremely variable. So on a turbo trainer, if I'm doing my 15-minute working block, for example, I know that I can set the resistance to a consistent level for those 15 minutes. Whereas if I'm cycling outside, it's likely that I'm going to hit traffic lights, it's likely I'm going to be rolling downhill, uphill, and have different intensities to fight against. Whereas here, I can get my head tucked in and I can just grind out for 15 minutes without worrying what's in front of me. Which is another thing, as I'm in this time trial position, there's times where I'm going to be looking down, not paying attention, and it takes away that mental focus for having to avoid traffic, hit traffic lights, and I can just keep moving. Now, with all of that being said, the Ironman is in fact outside and not on a turbo trainer. So we have to get some degree of specificity in there, which means cycling outside, which I will be doing when the weather warms up here in the UK, and once we have a good foundation of cardiovascular fitness set on the bike. But at least for now, it means I can work on my positions, it means I can track the data accurately without having those external variables, and it means I can really just grind it out without having to worry about the traffic, the gradients, the wind resistance, and especially the cold. So let's get into this session. So it did not take long for that sweat to start, but that's the first working block done. We're about 5 minutes into the working recovery now. Another 5 minutes to go, and then another big block of 15. So we're gonna go high gear for this one. Just try and pump it out, keeping the RPM above 70. I really wanna try and fatigue the legs to make that run afterwards difficult but purposeful. So let's go. That one was savage. That's actually probably the best bike session I've had in a while. Felt really strong. Must be those additional Christmas calories, but we're gonna wrap up last few minutes here. We're gonna heart rate down a bit. Trainers on, ready for that brick run. 20 minutes, nice and steady. Let's go. "20 minutes, 2.5 miles with a pace of 7:57 per mile. Very happy with that. Heart rate was a little bit high. Definitely went out too quick, but my legs were feeling warm. Stride felt good, so I pushed it. Ended up slowing down towards the last mile, but overall good pace, legs felt good. So I'm very happy with that as a altogether brick session. So that concludes what a typical training weekend looks like currently in my schedule. Now, obviously this will change slightly when I get into the 20-week program, but not hugely. So I'd usually rotate around doing the swim on a Saturday and the bike and the run on the Sunday, or doing the bike on a Saturday with a swim and a run on a Sunday. Now, the training program I'm going to be following, as you can see on the screen right now, is typically a big bike on a Saturday with a swim and a run on a Sunday, which is fine by me. And one thing I'm definitely going to be cautious of is building up volume too quickly. Now, 6 months, it doesn't sound like much time, but it's actually more time for me right now than I'm actually telling myself, because right now I can comfortably run around 9 miles, I can do 2 or 3K in a pool, and I can also cycle probably about 50 miles fairly comfortably without being too fatigued afterwards. Now, what I don't want to do is rush the process too quickly, because even in the first few weeks of this training program that's on the screen right now, the distances aren't actually huge, and I'm looking at them thinking they're going to be fairly comfortable. But what I don't want to do is build up the volume and intensity too quickly and risk getting injured, because this is a huge mistake that a lot of people make when they first get into endurance training. And being conscious that I'm still trying to balance this with other life stresses and also the strength and conditioning side of things as well, because if I can keep my 200 kilo squat, I'd still be pretty happy with that. So that concludes this training program, and something I'm also looking forward to chucking in this kind of training schedule as well is a half Ironman at some point, so stay tuned for that. But thanks so much for all the support on the first episode, and If you liked this episode, then make sure you give it a like. If you're new, then make sure to subscribe. Any feedback or comments are appreciated. And if you are planning on doing an endurance challenge of some sort, whether that's an Ironman or even just trying to do your first 5K, drop it in the comments. I'd love to see who else is joining me on this journey, and we will see you on the next episode 3 next week of the Ironman Project. Take care and see you then.